Welcome to my channel. Today's story is a journey of secrets, transformation, and a side of myself. I never thought I would end up here, standing in front of a mirror wearing an apron that wasn't mine, realizing that the person staring back at me had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. This isn't a story about clothes, though clothes play their part. This is about the day I understood what it really means to be a partner, to be a wife, and how that understanding rewrote everything I thought I knew about myself. It started on a Tuesday morning, ordinary in every way except for one question my partner Sarah asked me over coffee. She looked tired, more tired than usual, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She had been working double shifts at the hospital for 3 weeks straight, and I could see the weight of exhaustion settling into her shoulders. I was between jobs, had been for about 2 months, and while I sent out resumes and attended interviews, the days stretched long and empty. Sarah never complained, never made me feel less than, but that morning she set down her coffee cup and asked me something that would change both our lives forever. "Can you take care of things here for a while?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need you to really take care of things. I mean everything. The house, the meals, the emotional stuff, all of it. I need to focus on work right now and I need to know that home is handled." I said yes, without hesitation, thinking I understood what she meant. I had done chores before, cooked meals, cleaned the apartment. How hard could it be to do it more consistently? I had no idea that what I was agreeing to would unravel and rebuild me from the inside out. The first week I approached it like a project manager, making lists and schedules, treating our home like a business operation that needed optimizing. I meal prepped on Sundays, set reminders for laundry, created a cleaning rotation that would make any efficiency expert proud. I felt accomplished when Sarah came home to a clean house and dinner on the table. But I noticed something in her face, a flicker of disappointment she tried to hide behind her smile. "You did all this," she said, gesturing to the spotless living room and the precisely plated dinner, "but did you notice I've been wearing the same hair tie for 4 days because I can't find where you reorganized everything? Did you see that my favorite sweater is still in the wash because it needs to be hand-washed and air-dried? Did you remember that Tuesdays are hard for me because that's when I lost my mom and maybe I needed something comforting for dinner, not this healthy quinoa thing?" I stood there, spatula in hand, feeling like I had been punched in the chest. I had been so focused on the tasks that I had missed the entire point. Taking care of the home wasn't about efficiency or checking boxes. It was about paying attention, about knowing another person so deeply that you could anticipate their needs before they spoke them. It was about emotional labor, a term I had heard before but never truly understood until that moment. That night after Sarah went to bed early, exhausted from another 12-hour shift, I sat on the couch and really thought about what she needed from me. It wasn't a cleaner or a cook, though those things mattered. She needed a partner who could hold the emotional center of our home, who could create a space where she felt seen and cared for and safe. She needed, I realized with a strange flutter in my chest, what she had always provided for me. She needed a wife in the truest sense of the word, regardless of gender or traditional roles. The next morning I started over, but this time I approached it differently. I went through Sarah's routine like a detective, noting the little things. She always checked her phone while drinking coffee, scrolling through news that made her anxious, so I started printing out funny comics and leaving them by her cup. She hated making decisions after work, so I stopped asking what she wanted for dinner and instead made things I knew brought her comfort. When she mentioned in passing that she missed her grandmother's garden, I bought herbs for the windowsill and sent her photos during the day of how they were growing. Small things, but I saw her shoulders relax a little more each evening. 2 weeks in, something strange started happening to me. I found myself moving through the apartment differently, noticing dust in corners I had never seen before, understanding the rhythm of our home like a song I was learning to play. I started wearing Sarah's old college sweatshirt while I cleaned because it was comfortable and smelled like her lavender detergent. I realized I had been tying my hair back with a scrunchie instead of my usual rubber band because it was gentler and I had started caring about things like that. One afternoon while folding laundry, I held up one of Sarah's dresses, a soft blue thing she wore on our first date. On impulse, I tried it on, standing in our bedroom feeling ridiculous and curious in equal measure. It didn't fit quite right, I was taller and broader, but something about seeing myself in it made my heart race. Not because it was feminine, but because I suddenly understood something about softness, about allowing yourself to be gentle and vulnerable and open. I took it off quickly, feeling like I had crossed some invisible line, but the image stayed with me. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't start with makeup or heels or any of the external things people might imagine. It started with learning a completely new language, one I had somehow never been fluent in despite living 32 years on this planet. The language of care, of noticing, of emotional attentiveness. I began keeping a small notebook, and I know how that sounds, but I needed to write things down. Sarah mentioned she had a big presentation on Thursday, that she was nervous about it, so I put a reminder to make her favorite breakfast that morning and to leave an encouraging note in her bag. She said her work shoes were giving her blisters, so I researched foot care and left a basin of warm water with Epsom salts ready when she got home. When her best friend was going through a divorce, I remembered to ask about it, to give Sarah space to process her feelings about it, to understand that sometimes my job was just to listen and hold space for her emotions. This was the work that no one sees, the invisible labor that keeps relationships and households running. I started to understand why Sarah had been so exhausted, because she had been doing all of this for years while also working full-time. She had been the one to remember birthdays, to keep track of our social obligations, to manage the emotional temperature of our relationship, to carry the mental load of literally everything. And she had done it so seamlessly that I had barely noticed it was happening. Now it was my turn, and it was harder than any job I had ever had. 3 weeks into this experiment, I was in the grocery store trying to remember if we were out of the specific brand of yogurt Sarah liked when I ran into my friend Marcus. He looked at my shopping cart, filled with fresh vegetables and fancy cheese, and the ingredients for homemade bread I was attempting, and he laughed. "Dude," he said, "what happened to you? You look like someone's housewife." It was meant as a joke, the kind of casual ribbing friends do, but it hit me differently than I expected. I felt my face flush, felt a strange mix of shame and something else I couldn't quite identify. Was I becoming a housewife? And why did that bother me? I had always considered myself progressive, had always believed that gender roles were ridiculous and limiting, but here I was feeling embarrassed about doing work that was valuable and necessary just because it was traditionally associated with women. That night I told Sarah about the encounter while we ate the slightly lopsided bread I had baked. She was quiet for a moment, then she reached across the table and took my hand. "You know what I love about what you've been doing," she said. "It's not that you're doing stereotypically feminine things. It's that you're showing up fully, that you're present and attentive and caring. That's not about gender. That's about love." But I could tell she was thinking about something more. A few days later she came home with a bag from her favorite boutique. "I got you something," she said, "and I want you to hear me out before you react." She pulled out a soft cardigan, dove gray and made of the kind of cashmere that feels like a cloud. "I thought you might like this," she said. "I've noticed you wearing my sweatshirts and I thought maybe you're discovering that you like softer things. There's nothing wrong with that." I held the cardigan like it might bite me, but when I put it on it felt perfect, comfortable in a way my old button-downs never had. Sarah smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks. "It suits you," she said. Over the next few weeks, small additions appeared in my wardrobe. Sarah never pushed, never made a big deal of it, but she would come home with a scarf or a pair of house slippers that were more elegant than masculine or a moisturizer that smelled like vanilla instead of the harsh cedar stuff I used to use. Each time I tried these things, I felt a little more permission to be soft, to care about comfort and beauty and gentleness. And something was shifting in how I moved through the world. I caught myself in the mirror one day and realized I was standing differently, my posture more open, my expression softer. I had started doing skincare routines at night, taking time to care for myself the way I was learning to care for Sarah and our home. It felt good, this attention to detail, this tenderness directed inward and outward. But the real breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when Sarah called me crying from the hospital. One of her long-term patients, a little girl she had been treating for months, had taken a turn for the worse. Sarah was devastated, blaming herself even though I knew rationally it wasn't her fault. She said she would be home late, that she needed to finish her shift, but she didn't know how she was going to get through it. I did something I had never done before. I got in the car and drove to the hospital with a thermos of her favorite tea and a care package I threw together. A soft blanket, her comfort snacks, a handwritten note reminding her that she was an incredible doctor and an even better human. When I arrived at the nurse's station and asked for her, I saw the surprise on her colleagues' faces, and then something else, a kind of knowing approval. One of the older nurses smiled at me and said, "You're doing good work, honey, taking care of our girl." Sarah appeared looking wrecked, mascara smudged and eyes red, and when she saw me standing there with the thermos and the bag, she broke down completely. We found an empty consultation room and I just held her while she cried, not trying to fix anything, not offering solutions, just being there. This, I realized, was what being a wife meant. It wasn't about the cooking or cleaning, though those mattered. It was about showing up in the moments of crisis with exactly what your partner needed. It was about paying such close attention to another person that you became fluent in the language of their heart. After that day at the hospital, something fundamental shifted between us. Sarah started to truly relax at home in a way I hadn't seen in years. She would come through the door and just drop her bag, knowing I would take care of it, that I would have thought about dinner and whether we needed groceries and if her work clothes were clean for tomorrow. She started to trust that I was holding things, really holding them, and in that trust she found space to breathe. For me, the changes were becoming more pronounced. I had always been someone who lived in their head, analytical and sometimes emotionally distant. Sarah used to joke that I had two settings, problem-solving mode and sleep mode. But now I was discovering a whole spectrum of feeling and expression I had locked away. I noticed beauty differently. The way afternoon light came through our kitchen window. The satisfaction of folding clothes in neat stacks that looked like they belonged in a magazine. The quiet joy of making something with my hands that would nourish or comfort someone I loved. One Saturday morning I woke up early and found myself watching makeup tutorials on my phone. I told myself I was just curious, that it was interesting from a technical perspective, but that wasn't entirely true. I was drawn to the transformation aspect, the way someone could highlight and shape and become a different version of themselves. When Sarah woke up and caught me watching, I expected her to tease me, but instead she sat down next to me on the couch and said, "Do you want to try?" My heart was pounding, but I nodded. She disappeared into the bathroom and came back with her makeup bag, and for the next hour she taught me basics. How to even out skin tone, how to do something simple with eyeshadow, how to apply mascara without stabbing yourself in the eye. When she was done she turned me toward the mirror and I barely recognized myself. I didn't look like a woman exactly, I still had my strong jaw and my broad shoulders, but I looked softer, more approachable, more like the person I was becoming on the inside. "I think I might be having an identity crisis," I said, trying to laugh, but my voice cracked. Sarah squeezed my hand. "I think you're having an identity breakthrough," she said. "You're letting yourself explore parts of yourself you always kept locked down because you thought men weren't supposed to care about these things. But caring, being gentle, embracing beauty and softness, those aren't gendered traits. They're human traits. You're just becoming more fully yourself." We spent that whole weekend talking, really talking about gender and identity and what it meant to be a partner. Sarah shared things I had never known, about how exhausting it was to be the only one managing emotions in a relationship, about how lonely she had felt even though we were together. And I shared how lost I had been, how I had been performing a version of masculinity that never quite fit, how this process of taking care of our home had cracked me open in ways that were terrifying and exhilarating. On Sunday evening we made dinner together, and I was wearing the gray cardigan and a touch of the makeup, just enough to feel different, and Sarah kept looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Finally she said, "I want to ask you something and you can say no. Would you consider, maybe, exploring this further? The clothing, the role, the identity. Not because I need you to be something you're not, but because I think you might need to explore this for yourself." My mouth went dry. What did that even mean? Exploring further. Dressing more femininely. Taking on the wife role more completely. Questioning my gender identity. All of the above. I didn't know, but I knew that something in me responded to the suggestion with a yes, that came from somewhere deep and undeniable. Over the next few weeks I started experimenting more. I ordered some clothes online, things that were technically androgynous but leaned feminine. Soft sweaters, comfortable leggings for wearing around the house, tunics that skimmed my body without trying to hide it. I let my hair grow a bit longer. I started paying attention to how I presented myself, not for anyone else, but because it felt good to care about these things. And I dove deeper into the role I was inhabiting. I started planning our meals a week in advance, really thinking about nutrition and comfort and what would make Sarah feel loved. I took over all the household management, the bills and scheduling and the endless small decisions that pile up. I became the one who remembered to send birthday cards to Sarah's family, who knew when we were running low on the obscure spice she liked, who noticed when the bathroom grout needed cleaning before it became a problem. It was exhausting and fulfilling in equal measure. One evening Sarah came home to find me in the kitchen wearing an apron over a long comfortable dress I had bought, my hair tied back, music playing while I stirred something on the stove. She stopped in the doorway and just watched me, and when I turned and saw her expression I felt suddenly vulnerable. "Is this weird?" I asked. "Is it too much?" She crossed the room and kissed me, really kissed me, in a way she hadn't in months. "It's perfect," she said. "You're perfect. You look happy." I realized she was right. I was happy. Happier than I had been in years. This life we were building, where I held the center and created sanctuary and devoted myself to care, it wasn't diminishing me. It was expanding me. I was discovering capacities I didn't know I had, for patience and attention and love expressed through 1,000 small actions. But happiness is never simple, and transformation is never smooth. About 2 months into this new life, I had a job interview for a position I really wanted. Senior analyst at a consulting firm, exactly the kind of career move I had been working toward. I showed up in my old uniform, dark suit and tie, hair slicked back, trying to project confidence and competence. But sitting in that sterile office, answering questions about synergies and market optimization, I felt like I was wearing a costume of someone I used to be. I got the job. They called 2 days later with an offer, good salary, benefits, the whole package. I should have been thrilled, but instead I felt a creeping sense of dread. Taking this job would mean returning to the person I was before, long hours at an office, the mental energy consumed by corporate strategy instead of household care. It would mean Sarah and I would be back to our old dynamic, both exhausted, ships passing in the night, no one holding the center. When I told Sarah about the offer I tried to sound excited, but she saw right through me. "Do you want this job?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. I thought I did. I thought this was what I was supposed to want. But the idea of going back to that life, it feels like putting on shoes that don't fit anymore. "So don't take it," she said simply. "But I need to contribute," I said, feeling a surge of old programming. I can't just be a house husband forever. People will think I'm a failure, that I'm lazy, that I'm taking advantage of you. Sarah's face hardened in a way I rarely saw. "First of all," she said, "you're contributing more to my quality of life right now than any amount of money could. I'm sleeping better, eating better, my stress levels have dropped, I'm actually enjoying coming home. That has value, real value. Second, who are these people you're worried about? Because anyone who matters isn't judging you, and anyone who's judging you doesn't matter." We had our first real fight then. I accused her of not understanding the pressure I felt, the societal expectations, the voice in my head that said real men don't stay home in dresses taking care of the house. She countered that I was projecting my own internalized shame onto invisible critics, that I was more worried about some hypothetical judgment than about my own happiness or our relationship. We went to bed angry that night, on opposite sides of the mattress, and I lay awake feeling like I was being torn in two. The next few days were tense. I accepted the job because I didn't know what else to do, told them I could start in 2 weeks. I stopped wearing the dresses, went back to my old clothes, let the routine slip. Sarah didn't say anything, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes, and worse, the resignation. She started staying later at the hospital again, and I knew we were sliding backward into our old patterns. 1 week before I was supposed to start the new job, I had coffee with my sister Emma. We had always been close, and she knew something was wrong the moment she saw me. You look miserable, she said. So I told her everything. About the arrangement with Sarah, about discovering this new way of being, about the clothes and the identity exploration and the profound satisfaction I found in caring for our home. About the job offer and the shame I felt and the feeling of being trapped between two versions of myself. Emma listened without interrupting, and when I finished she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. Do you remember when I went back to work after having the twins? I nodded. It was a disaster, she continued. I was trying to be everything to everyone and I was failing at all of it. And then Josh and I made the decision that he would stay home with the kids while I focused on my career. People had opinions, oh boy did they have opinions. They told him he was whipped, told me I was an unnatural mother, told us we were damaging our children. And you know what we did? We ignored them. Because our family was happier, our marriage was stronger, and our kids were thriving. You can't live your life according to other people's scripts. She reached across the table and gripped my hand. You found something that makes you happy and makes Sarah happy. Why on earth would you give that up? But it's not just about being a stay-at-home partner, I said. It's also about, I don't know, gender stuff. I'm a man who likes wearing dresses and makeup and taking care of the house. What does that make me? It makes you a person, Emma said firmly. A person who's finally figuring out who they are beyond what society told them they should be. Maybe you're trans, maybe you're non-binary, maybe you're just a guy who likes feminine things. It doesn't matter what label you use or don't use. What matters is that you're being authentic. I drove home from that coffee date with tears streaming down my face, months of tension finally releasing. Emma was right. I had been so caught up in what I was supposed to be that I had almost thrown away the most genuine version of myself I had ever found. When I got home Sarah was already there, having left work early, sitting on the couch looking as miserable as I felt. I need to tell you something, we both said at the same time, then laughed despite everything. You first, Sarah said. I'm not taking the job, I said. I'm going to call them tomorrow and decline. This life we've built over the past few months, it's the happiest I've ever been. I don't want to go back to who I was before. I want to be here, taking care of us, taking care of you. I want to keep exploring this version of myself, whoever that turns out to be. Sarah started crying, and I crossed the room to hold her. I was going to tell you, she sobbed, that I would support whatever you decided, even if it meant going back to how things were. But I've been so sad thinking about losing you like this. We stayed there on the couch for a long time, holding each other, feeling like we had just narrowly avoided losing something precious. Turning down the job was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The recruiter was confused, kept asking if it was about money, if they could sweeten the offer. I finally just said that my priorities had changed and left it at that. Telling friends and family was harder. My father didn't understand it all, gave me a lecture about responsibility and wasting my potential. Some friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the choices I was making. But others surprised me. My college roommate said he was envious, that he wished he had the courage to step off the hamster wheel. Sarah's mother, who I had always found intimidating, told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her daughter and that she didn't care what I wore or how I spent my days as long as Sarah was happy. With the job decision behind me, I felt free to dive even deeper into becoming the person I was meant to be. I started attending a support group for people exploring gender identity, not because I was sure I was trans, but because I needed community with others who were questioning the rigid boxes society puts us in. I met people with all kinds of stories, some were transitioning, some were non-binary, some were like me, just expanding their understanding of what their gender could look like. There was a person named River who became a good friend, someone who had been exactly where I was 2 years earlier. River told me that they had started out thinking they were just a crossdresser, then thought maybe they were trans, and eventually settled into a fluid identity that didn't fit any neat categories. The labels matter less than the journey, River said. Let yourself explore without needing to have all the answers right away. Through the group I learned about the concept of the femme role in relationships, how in some lesbian relationships there's a dance between masculine and feminine energies that has nothing to do with biological sex and everything to do with how you show up in partnership. I learned that what I was experiencing had a long history, that people had been exploring and subverting gender roles for as long as humans had been around. I wasn't an anomaly or a failure. I was part of a tradition of people brave enough to live authentically. At home, Sarah and I started intentionally creating rituals around our new dynamic. Every Sunday morning I would do her nails while we talked about the week ahead, planning and connecting. Every evening when she came home I would have tea ready and we would sit together for 20 minutes, no phones, just talking about our days. We created a life that felt intentional and sacred, built around care and presence. I expanded my wardrobe more boldly, adding dresses and skirts to my daily rotation, experimenting with makeup looks, growing my hair longer and learning to style it. Some days I presented more masculine, some days more feminine, following what felt right rather than any external rule. Sarah loved all versions of me, but I noticed she was especially affectionate when I was in full femme mode, and I asked her about it one evening. "It's not that I don't love you however you present," she said thoughtfully. "But when you're fully embracing this softer side, you seem more at peace, more yourself. That energy, that authenticity, that's what I'm responding to." We also started talking about the future in new ways. Did I want to be called different pronouns? Maybe sometimes, I wasn't sure yet. Did I want to be introduced as her wife instead of her husband? The idea sent a thrill through me that I couldn't deny. We decided to have a commitment ceremony, not a legal wedding since we were already married, but a celebration of this new chapter. We would renew our vows with me presenting as I was now, fully myself, surrounded by the people who supported us. Planning the ceremony became a beautiful project. I worked with Emma to design an outfit that felt perfect, a custom suit with a long flowing jacket that was masculine in structure but feminine in detail, paired with subtle makeup and my hair styled soft. Sarah wore a sharp tuxedo, and we loved the reversal of expectations, the way we were writing our own rules. The ceremony itself was small, just close friends and family in our backyard that I had spent weeks making beautiful. When it came time for vows I spoke about transformation and care, about how Sarah had given me permission to become fully myself, and about how I was committing not just to our relationship but to this path of authenticity and devotion. I promised to hold the center of our home, I said, to care for you with intention and attention, to show up softly and strongly, to keep exploring who I am and who we are together. Sarah's vows were about trust and admiration, about how she had fallen in love with me all over again watching me embrace this journey. "You showed me," she said, "that real strength is being vulnerable enough to change, and that real partnership is about creating space for each other to grow, even when that growth looks different than anything we imagined." There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard, and afterward people kept coming up to me saying how moved they were, how inspired they felt to examine their own lives and relationships. River hugged me and whispered, "You're doing the work, you're really doing the work." The party afterward was joyful and easy, and I spent the evening in my beautiful outfit, hosting and caring for our guests, making sure everyone was fed and happy, fully inhabiting the role I had grown into. At one point I caught my reflection in the window and didn't recognize myself for a moment, not because I looked different but because I looked right, like all the pieces had finally clicked into place. In the months after our ceremony, life settled into a rhythm that felt both extraordinary and completely natural. I had been living as a full-time homemaker for almost a year, and the person I had become was so far from who I was before that sometimes I marveled at the journey. But it wasn't the external changes that mattered most, though those were significant. It was the internal transformation, the complete rewiring of how I understood partnership, care, and my own worth. I thought a lot about the word wife and what it meant to me now. It wasn't about gender, not really. Sarah sometimes called me her wife, sometimes her husband, sometimes her partner, and all of them felt true in different ways. What wife meant to me was someone who holds space, who creates sanctuary, who loves through action and attention. It meant being the person who remembered that Sarah's grandmother's birthday was coming up and helping her pick out a gift and write a meaningful card. It meant knowing that on the anniversary of her patient's death she would need extra tenderness, and having that ready without being asked. It meant managing the invisible infrastructure of our life together so that she could focus her energy where it was needed most. But it also meant allowing myself to be cared for in return. Sarah brought home flowers for me, noticed when I was tired and insisted I rest while she handled things. She asked about my day, about my feelings, about my continued exploration of identity. Our relationship became truly reciprocal in a way it never had been before, because I had learned to be vulnerable enough to receive care, not just give it. I also learned that this work I was doing, this care work, was some of the hardest and most important work there is. It required emotional intelligence, organizational skills, creativity, patience, physical stamina, and a kind of selflessness that didn't erase the self but expanded it. On hard days when I felt invisible or undervalued, I reminded myself that I was doing work that sustained life and love, and that it mattered even when no one saw it. I started a blog about my experience, writing under a pseudonym at first about the journey of becoming a homemaker, about exploring gender presentation, about redefining masculinity and partnership. I was shocked by the response. Hundreds of people reached out, sharing their own stories of feeling trapped by gender roles, of wanting to explore different ways of being, of struggling to value care work in a society that only respects paid labor. I realized I wasn't alone, that there was a hunger for different models of how to live and love. Through the blog I connected with others who were on similar journeys. A man named David who stayed home with his kids and found himself drawn to feminine presentation. A non-binary person named Sam who was redefining what it meant to be a spouse. A woman named Keisha who was exploring her masculine side after years of performing femininity. We formed a virtual community, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the victories. One day about 14 months into this journey, I was cleaning the kitchen after making an elaborate dinner when I caught sight of myself in the reflection of the window. I was wearing a simple dress and apron, my hair pulled back, a dusting of flour on my cheek. I looked tired and content and completely myself. And I realized that I had stopped thinking about this as an experiment or a phase. This was just who I was now. I had become the wife, in all the ways that mattered. Sarah came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking about how becoming this version of myself was the scariest and best thing I've ever done," I said. "I'm thinking about how I almost threw it all away because I was afraid of what people would think. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you saw who I could be before I saw it myself." Sarah turned me around to face her. "You did this," she said firmly. "I might have asked you to step up at home, but you took that invitation and transformed it into something neither of us could have predicted. You did the hard work of examining yourself, of being brave enough to change, of prioritizing authenticity over approval. I'm grateful for you every single day." We still had challenges, of course. Money was sometimes tight on one income. I still had moments of doubt, wondering if I should be doing more or different things with my life. We navigated questions about if or when we might have children, and what that would look like given our dynamic. But we faced everything as true partners, with the foundation of care and attention and devotion we had built. Looking back now from where I stand today, I can say with certainty that the journey of becoming a wife, of embracing care work and softness and service and vulnerability, didn't diminish me. It didn't make me less of a person or less of a man or whatever label you want to use. It made me more fully human. It taught me that there's profound power in making someone's life easier, in paying attention to the details that create comfort and safety. It showed me that traditional gender roles are just one option among infinite possibilities for how to structure a life and a partnership. It revealed that my worth wasn't tied to my job title or my income or performing a certain kind of masculinity. My worth came from showing up with love, with intention, with presence. The clothes and makeup and external presentation, those were just tools that helped me access parts of myself I had been taught to suppress. They weren't the point. The point was learning to care deeply, to be soft without being weak, to find strength in service and devotion. The point was creating a partnership where both people could thrive, where labor was valued regardless of whether it came with a paycheck, where each person could be fully themselves without apology. I hope that by sharing this story, someone else who feels trapped by expectations will find the courage to explore what authenticity looks like for them. Maybe that's embracing care work like I did. Maybe it's something completely different. But whatever it is, I hope you'll give yourself permission to try, to experiment, to fail and adjust and try again. Because on the other side of that fear, on the other side of worrying what people will think, there's a version of yourself that's been waiting to emerge. There's a life that fits you like your favorite clothes, comfortable and true. There's a partnership that's built on mutual care and genuine seeing. It's worth the journey. Every moment of discomfort, every hard conversation, every scary step into the unknown. It's worth it to arrive at a place where you can look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back, where you can move through your days with purpose and peace, where you can love and be loved without performance or pretense. I became a wife not because I put on dresses or learned to cook, though I did those things. I became a wife because I learned the language of devotion, because I discovered that there's no higher calling than creating sanctuary for someone you love, because I found the courage to be soft in a world that tells men they have to be hard. And in becoming a wife, I finally became myself. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to our channel.